What is it we're doing when we think we're helping by giving? What motivates us to give, to do good by giving? What I'm presenting is a fairly random collection of anthropological, philosophical, and literary musings on the nature of giving and receiving gifts. Now, I'm not talking about presents like you would give at Christmas or a wedding, but specifically the kinds of gifts that are meant to help those perceived to be in need. I call this doing good giving. I find that I'm both attracted to and repelled by this kind of giving, and I'm trying to figure out why. Is doing good giving about religious obligation? One of my MA students, Lucy Ellis, did research on the Troker Lenten campaign, and what she found was that people felt the recipient of their giving was actually Christ, but to complete the transaction, they needed needy people in the third world. Now, for anthropologists, all discussions of gifts and giving start with French sociologist Marcel Mauss and his famous essay, The Gift. Mauss was inspired by the anthropologist Malinowski and his study of the Coolering on the Trobriand Islands, a case of exchange that was more social than economic. Now, in turn, Mauss inspired generations of anthropologists who love his observations about forms of exchange in so-called primitive societies that are richly ceremonial, highly social, and seem to embody a mysterious force that impels one to reciprocate the thing received. But the part of Mauss that intrigues me the most is a brief moment in his conclusion when he writes, "Charity is wounding for the one who has accepted it, and all the effort of our morality tends toward abolishing the thoughtless and insulting patronage of the rich almsgiver." Why is charity wounding? What are we demonstrating when we engage in doing good giving? Is it our empathy, our solidarity, our desire to help? Of course, it's easy to do more harm than good, especially if we decide what needs to be given without consulting recipients. Are we demonstrating our largesse, our capacity to be generous? Pierre Bourdieu argued that this can amount to a form of deliberately misrecognized domination, something he calls symbolic violence. And there may be a very thin line between this and actual violence. Now, Mauss's point was that because charity flows in one direction only, that mysterious force that compels return and creates an enduring social relation is missing. So, in spite of its best intentions, such giving amounts to a denial of reciprocity and a reinforcement of inequality. Others before Mauss seem to get this as well. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "The only gift is a portion of thyself. Thou must bleed for me. The gift to be true must be the flowing of the giver unto me, correspondent to my flowing unto him." Now, in Emerson's vision of giving, no one comes out on top. He says, when the waters are at level, then my goods pass to him, and his to me. All his are mine, all mine his. This sounds more like the seas of the Trobriand Islands, as opposed to a waterfall that flows only one way. Well, when we're talking about doing good giving, is there a difference between charity and development aid? Anthropologist Jonathan Benthall points out that the word charity is avoided in development circles because the concept of charity is considered demeaning to aid recipients, just as Mauss observed. Yet Benthall argues that a lot of development aid is in fact charity by another name because the impulse behind it is a sense of obligation to the principle of helping by giving. Avoidance of a demeaning word is no guarantee of avoidance of a demeaning relationship, so he says. I'm sort of obsessed by the image of flows of aid around the world. I'm fascinated by the widespread ready acceptance that aid somehow naturally flows one way, and that it properly flows from certain parts of the world to certain other parts of the world. This seems to go along with the fantasy that convinces us that humans are neatly divided into global north and global south. Some argue that this is not really meant to be taken as a literal geographical division, while others are busily working on mapping it. Between north and south, you can guess which direction aid is supposed to flow. But then there's the emerging donors. Former recipients of aid who are now very actively taking on the mantle of the donor, even though they are not allowed into the traditional donors club. Now, I study Russia, which occupies an interesting position because although it's the R in BRICS, it's kind of hard to place it in the south. Now, some celebrate the beauty of South-South cooperation, while others wring their hands over the dangers of these unregulated aid flows. Either way, these emerging donors are pushing back against the symbolic violence of being stuck at the bottom of the waterfall as perpetual recipients, rather than being set sail on the level seas of reciprocity. But alas, in the system of aid that we've constructed, donors need recipients in order to get to give. So someone has to stay down there at the bottom of the waterfall and play the part. Thus the relentless significance of Africa as an iconic aid recipient for emerging and established donors alike. If Mauss was right, then all our efforts to bring justice and equality to the most impoverished by bombarding them with aid might amount to a denial of reciprocity and a reinforcement of inequality. Alas, it looks like the waters aren't level yet. you.